Hello everyone and welcome back to AD. This is the fourth analysis video for the series Shuumatsu no Valkyrie, covering the fourth fight, Heracles vs Jack the Ripper. With the victory taken against the gods, Brunhild must be careful in her next representative, as the gods would not allow there to be another loss. For the first time since the beginning of the tournament, we see a god from the heaven side that is not a pure god, who has a good relationship with the Valkyries, with Brunhild going as far as to bow and wish luck upon Heracles and him wishing it upon her. The interaction between Loki and Heracles is rather interesting, as Heracles outright states that he does not favour the ending of humanity, which could paint him as a hypocrite since it was stated in the first chapter that there was a unanimous vote to end humanity. However, I would say that there is clear hatred towards demigods and that they are not involved in any voting process, ensuring that only pure gods are involved, as shown by what Odin's raven stated in anger towards Brunhild speaking in the conference. Even though there is no clear respect for demigods, Heracles was still chosen as a representative, with respect shown towards him from the much younger gods. Going back to the conversation, Heracles goes on to clarify that he is a military man, fighting for his army, choosing to save humanity in a different direction than Brunhild's, deciding to not side with the group. His ideologies makes him believe that he should side with only justice, leaving us to believe that he does not agree with the path that Brunhild took. The time that Heracles spent as a demigod made him build a connection with the gods, and thus fight for their justice too, choosing to change the god's perspective in his own way. This naivety of Heracles becomes a huge talking point, and one that will become vital for his opponent to use, as it leads him to accepting the fighting grounds that the serial killer requests. In this fight, humanity must fight against the justice of the gods, and what opponent to fight against such justice than an evil monster? It is then revealed by Brunhild, after showing a very airy side, that the contender that is fighting this time is specifically chosen as a counter to Heracles. Unlike the previous three fights, this time a planned attack is taking place, choosing the darkest evil that she can draw to fight against the most just of the gods. Despite the strides that humanity has made in changing the minds of the gods, taunts will still happen, and that is shown when it is revealed that the arena was a request from humanity that Heracles accepted. The childish taunts are expected to happen, as it is not possible to change the mindset of everyone, especially not at such a short period of time when they hold such hatred. The introduction of Jack the Ripper shows what the gods will deal with, as he is classed as a monster, setting the atmosphere clearly with the terror that he caused, which shows a huge reaction from the audience to the terror that is before them. A murderer representing humanity is, for obvious reasons, not a good sign, nor a good look for humanity. Heracles' intro merely reiterates what was stated earlier on in his first introduction, as it states that he is the envoy of justice for both man and god, which explains why he fights for both, having difficulties to choose a side when he wishes to understand and protect both. It is also stated that he is unparalleled in bravery, which was an interesting word using for him when fighting against Jack the Ripper, as a large quantity of individuals believe that serial killers are cowards, something that was present in Jack the Ripper in this fight, with the constant use of coward in regards to the method that he uses to fight. However, this method of fighting that is classed as cowardly is merely classed as being a gentleman by Jack. The theme of this fight is made clear, with the usage of evil versus justice. That is the main theme used and what the fight is standing on. I will try to make as many parallels and underlining themes that I believe are present throughout the fight, but I will mainly aim to focus on this theme presented to us by the manga. And this theme is heavily highlighted in terms used such as ascended in relation to Heracles becoming a god, as well as void in relation to Jack being the most corrupt human. Before we go on to the beginning of the fight, I would like to go over what was stated by Heimdall. Has there ever been one so clear-cut in relation to the theme of this fight? Justice and evil are terms that are subjective. Having a notion of what is evil will depend on the perspective of an individual, as well as the atmosphere raised and the environment. The same notion also applies to justice. Depending on the ideology that an individual holds, someone's justice may mean something different to someone else's. And as the main core of the fight, the ideologies of both Jack the Ripper and Heracles are now pitted against each other in this fight to the death. Heracles making note of the worthiness of the previous fighters is something worth highlighting, as he goes on to state that they have been able to shake the hearts of the gods, causing interest and enjoyment in this tournament, at times even showing respect to the humans, something shown prior to the start of this fight, with Zeus stating that humanity is strong. However, now after taking such strides, the worst man to fight in such a tournament is chosen. Not only is he not as warrior-esque as the previous three fighters, he is the most cunning of them all. Jack shows what he states to be his Vonand. A theory goes on to state that Jack the Ripper is a barber, unrelated to this fight but something that I find quite interesting. Confronting and not running away from a fight is a characteristic of Heracles, choosing to take the opponent's full resolve without holding back, as a sign of respect to his opponent, which is parallel to what Jack does, as he quickly decides to run away right at the start of the fight. A confrontational god who looks to focus more on brawn, facing against a strategist who favours fighting in a less confrontational manner. The first trick that Jack the Ripper places is of huge importance. At the time, Jack states that he merely threw those knives at Heracles to make sure that human weapons do not indeed harm the body of a god, which for obvious reasons does make sense, as he is a strategist. As such, he would like to be assured of the results of a possible outcome, choosing to test and confirm for himself. However, the reason behind it was a mere bluff, as this was the first step in ensuring that the outcome at chapter 25 is reached. Jack imprinted onto Heracles that certain weapons that he throws at him are non-Vonand, which provides a pattern for him, something that he is bound to notice and take advantage of. This ability of Jack to implement a pattern into Heracles is done further on in the fight, for example, by lying about the scissors being his Vonand and then stating that his pouches are, which help to prove what he states in regards to the limitation of the weapons he can draw from the pouch, following the same rule that he brought forward, whilst simultaneously using weapons from the pouch to assault Heracles. This is able to work due to the way that Heracles fights, which is by merely seeing rather than speculating, choosing to believe the opponent's word if there is a speck of truth behind them, which is highly disadvantageous against a serial killer who sets many small bluffs that work together for one huge trick. Jack the Ripper is a great actor, something shown in this panel when his fake Vonand was broken, and when Heracles approaches him to end the battle, taking the right steps to ensure that he makes it look as if he is in a corner and giving huge confidence to his opponents, to then catch them in a trap. As I stated earlier, upbringing is something that shapes the ideologies of an individual, and Heracles' upbringing is brought into question as Jack states that he must have had a fortunate one for him to fall for a simple trap, which speaks more for Jack than Heracles. I would state that the upbringing that he experiences made him choose to lie and trick in any situation to get what he needs, something that is shown later on in his backstory, and this becomes his norm, which leads him to believe falling for such traps says something more about Heracles than himself. Brunhald goes on to state that the thing that humanity excels in is malice. This malice that is brought about by the gods when deciding whether to end humanity or not is now before them, as Jack is stated to be that personification of it. The gods must fight against the malice that they intend to exterminate. In previous fights, I poked holes into the relationships that gods have towards others, and now we see full-hearted trust towards Heracles from Ares. Unlike the previous gods shown, Heracles was a human. As such, I would posit that he was able to build a relationship since his core ideologies does not make him place himself above everyone. However, that is not to throw away such a detail, as it shows that some gods are different in the way that they create relationships, and that they are not simply the arrogant gods who want to erase humanity. This is in and of itself what this fight attempts to do, gain a perspective on the good side of the gods, which hasn't been presented much, as well as the evil side of humanity, given birth to each two in the contenders. We now move on to the backstory of Heracles, focusing on him when he was a human with the name of Alcides. He was born weak, as such, always lost battles in an easy manner. There is not much stated about his family, but I would theorize that he also struggled in poverty due to the state of his body. Despite this weakness that he has, this unfair disadvantage, he fights for what he believes is right, always choosing the difficult path to ensure that he becomes stronger, for he wants to protect. We see once again the conference of mankind, showing that gods would destroy key elements of civilization when humans advance too far. I personally wish this point was clarified in more detail into what they believed was too much of an advancement, as what we see being destroyed are pyramids which were made for religious purposes, for the gods that destroyed them. It could be the case that the gods were not pleased with the essence of the pyramids, meaning the sacrificing of the humans for the gods, but they never stated what they allowed from humanity or showed care for human life. It would seem like they simply did not like the actions taken by someone who is inferior to them, not understanding them due to their own personal superiority. When humanity prays and awaits its destruction, Heracles stood forward and fought for them, and the superiority of the gods is shown, descending upon humanity when deciding what is just and what is not, sparing and taking life as they please, assigning sin as they please. As Heracles goes on to make a speech for humanity. In the previous fight, we received a speech describing what a god is, and now we see a description of the humans, the weakness that they hold which limits what they can do. Earlier, after the hunt was performed, the city of Thebes was shown to pray in gratitude of the gods. However, we never see Heracles in that mix, as he was too busy in his strive to get stronger, and in that scenario, when told about the ambrosia, he found no meaning in striving for strength that would end his life. However, this scenario is a death or death won. He will either die by the hands of the gods or by ambrosia. The most just of the two choices would be to wager his life, for he opposes the gods. As such, he drinks it, proclaiming that he will always be on the side of justice. Desiring divine power would seem to be something to be punished. However, Heracles was able to drink ambrosia before. As such, it is more accurate to state that it is punishment for those who are not worthy, chasing after something in evil intent. I state this due to Heracles being described as a hero, and now Heracles fighting for justice as a hero. Upon Zeus's interruption and the saving of Ares, he proposed to Heracles that he should become a god. Zeus states that him being left on Earth would become a huge problem later. This was a different side to see from Zeus. In usual scenarios, he would love a war to commence, but in here, after looking at the vanguards beaten by Heracles, he takes him into the god's side. It has been theorized that Zeus was preparing for Ragnarok since the start, which is the reason behind such a cunning plan. Which could be the case, but again, it's something that should be left over in a separate video, as I focus my attention on this particular fight. In this instant, Heracles becomes the face of humanity, leading them in righteousness, their paragon of justice. He is the literal hammer of justice, for he was appointed as such, and now as a representative for both mankind and gods, he would get rid of such evil from his sight. Another key aspect that I would like to highlight from this backstory is the change that Heracles was able to cause, or less thereof. Necessary evil is clearly being shown during this tournament, and Heracles does not agree with such notion, only choosing the purely just path. However, his path was not able to protect or lead humanity. Not taking away the impact that he had on individuals like Ares and Zeus, but outside that circle, it would seem like Heracles was able to change nothing, as every god still voted for the extinction of mankind. How would he have been able to stop this when every god is for it? Heracles' method is more focused in changing the system. However, such an approach is only viable when time is available. In such a scenario, there is no time. Humanity is on the brink of destruction. In the future, this may have worked, as shown by the young gods who adore a demigod. However, that is a future that humanity does not currently have, and so the necessary evil must exist to pave way for humanity. Something that Heracles does understand based on the speech he gave, but he does not agree with it, as the two contenders who fight for the same goal clash in the differences that they have. This fight becomes one of time, as Heracles uses his Heraclean exodus, a technique that takes away his life the more that it is used. Combining that with the damage that he is constantly taking from Jack's knives puts intense pressure on his body. Ares stating, "Use it against scum like that," shows that Heracles does show complete respect towards his opponent no matter how evil they may be, ensuring that he always goes with full power and matches his resolve, as stated by him at the beginning of the fight. The labour we delight in, physics pain. The first quote from Shakespeare that Jack uses in this fight, with it essentially meaning that the job that we enjoy doing does not feel like a job, putting passion and love behind it. Jack essentially states that this is his job, and that the pain that comes from it is part of the joy from the job itself. This introduction of Shakespeare also brings about the 5-act structure, which could be implemented in this fight. However, going over the fight and attempting to apply the acts to correlate with the first and final act that were stated by Jack would seem to be a difficulty. As such, I believe a 3-act structure was used, as Jack ends the first act. The first act was the introduction, the highlighting of the themes, the world, as well as the goal of the protagonist, all of which was made clear, with it being justice versus evil, with elements such as brain versus brawn, naivety versus cunningness, and the goal being to win the tournament and save humanity. With the problem being that if Heracles wins, humanity would get one step closer to destruction. I would classify Heracles as the protagonist in the story, as Jack places himself as the antagonist. This is evident with Act 2. Act 2 is the rising of action, with obstacles to ensure that the protagonist does not reach their goal, and this is what Jack does as he begins his full assault on Heracles. Rising action is not specifically related to just action, and in this scenario it would come to be the revealing of Jack's inner evil, the reason behind the malice, and the ability to see emotions. As we delve into a huge section of the drama that is loved dearly by the fans of this series, the backstory of Jack the Ripper. Based in London, the first glimpse we see in this city is a happy boy with his parents, having the time of his life, going on to see the parallel to that happiness, the darkness of this bright city, the alleyways of London. Jack gathers food from the trash as he is assaulted by the restaurant owner. In this harsh world that he lives in, he had his left eye which allowed him to survive. In this world of constant hate being thrown towards him, his mother showed him love and care. She became his meaning to live, as he strives to make her happy. He loved the emotions that he saw within his mother. It is then revealed that his mother had 5 children before Jack, and chose to abort them all, choosing Jack to live and to raise only him. This action of choosing only him to live put such a huge love to his mother, as he himself was chosen. He believed that he meant something to his mother, and as such, he always moved forward despite the harshness that he faces. Heracles was able to move forward and chase the justice that he chased due to the friend who he always had supporting him, whilst Jack moved to bring about emotions of love from the mother that loved and chose him, to see such colours. It is then revealed that an old client who promised to come back for her married into nobility, which makes her lose it. Jack, wishing to protect her, states that it is fine with just the two of us, which is clear sign that to him, she is his world, all that he lives for everything in the outside never took him in, showing evil emotions towards him. His mother was his escape from seeing such colours, and that ends today, as she outright states that she should not have given birth to him. After thinking that he meant everything to his mother and her meaning everything to him, it was revealed that he meant nothing. He was merely a child that was there to connect her to her dreams. Jack's world becomes tainted. His mother, that showed such loving colours that Jack admired, now shows evil colours just like the rest, and as such he attempts to free her from her tainted colours. Seeing such fake emotions being exposed and then seeing an emotion such as fear reveal itself changes Jack. To him, this becomes the only real emotion that cannot be faked and that holds true to everyone. His love is towards real colours, and the real colour of her fear excites Jack as he begins to mutilate his mother. Men at some time are masters of their fates. Another quote from Shakespeare that Jack uses, with the original quote meaning that sometimes people have to take steps that they think they can't, as Cassius argues that one should act when it is time to act, going for the chances to change his circumstances. The origin of the quote with the context that it comes from states that it is not fate that makes someone act in a way, rather than that is their weakness of character, and this seems to be a point that was brought later on after the backstory, as Heracles goes on to state that Jack lost. This would seem to match up, as both characters were dealt a difficult hand from fate. However, the way they reacted to it was different. Heracles was born with a weak body, and so he tried to change that, put in his own effort, as well as his character of being righteous, which made him rebel against the gods. Whilst you have Jack, who was fated to be born in the worst slums, treated like garbage. However, he had no grand reason to fight. He fought only for his mother, and so when his mother betrayed him, he lost it. It is important to not forget the context of those two. Heracles had our sides and his sense of justice, which seems to have been present from the beginning of time, possibly due to the period that he was born in, with everyone being aware of the existence of the gods, whilst Jack had the eyes that allowed him to see the emotions that he saw, and in the life that he lived, he only saw dark emotions thrown at him. As such, when he saw his own mother showcase the same emotions, it affected him much more. This becomes an argument of how much impact fate can have upon an individual. In both scenarios, the environments that they lived in largely affected the path that they took later in life, as well as the opportunities present to them by the world and time period that they lived in. I would suggest that seeing humanity struggle to please the gods and do right due to the awareness of the existence of gods built Heracles' righteousness, something that Jack did not have access to, as he lived in a world where gods do not interfere anymore. Let me know which side you take in this debate and why. I choose to go with fate impacting Jack's choices. The speech that Jack gives after we see his backstory shows his feelings about evil emotions, as the colour of fear would remove the impurities that humanity showcases. For Jack, the only way to solve the problems of humanity is by pulling out this fear to the surface, which is different to the beliefs of Heracles, shown later on in chapter 27. Heracles loves humanity despite the emotions that they showcase. This pushes the question of, if Heracles was able to see the colours of emotions of humanity, and if he lived in London, would he have been the same person that he is today? Yes, he is aware of the faults of mankind, however, he is not able to see them personified in colour, especially at such a young age. different sides to the same coin. That's something that came to mind when I read the backstory at first. After going more in depth with it now, I wouldn't agree as much. I would say that a more accurate categorization would be different sides to different coins. Jack taking Heracles' arms could be an indication of the climax. However, I would argue that it is merely more of the rise in action, more difficulties faced by the protagonist as his arm is taken away, and the clear motives of both characters are delved into, with Jack's true Volund on the verge of being explained. This is one of the reasons why I believe that Heracles is not as clueless as the series may make him out to be. During such a confusing attack, he was able to determine the truth of Jack's real Volund. Unlike individuals like Jack, who may plan and think of every outcome and speculate based on the person and reach a conclusion, Heracles has battle smarts, meaning that once he is in battle, he is able to determine what the opponent is doing based on their action towards him. Quite a simplistic and faulty method to use against a serial killer, but that is who he is. Gear's struggle is another interesting aspect we get in this fight. A young Valkyrie who is still too new to be connected to humanity as much as the others are. I would say that her reactions are more in line with what a normal individual would react in the face of seeing her brothers and sisters fall, making this fight a turning point for her characterization, as both her sister and brother are in danger of being taken away from existence, no matter the outcome. With the real nature of the Volund being revealed, we move to see the identity of the Valkyrie, the 11th Valkyrie sister, Hluk. One of the youngest of the Valkyrie sisters. As stated once again by Hluk, the Valkyrie and human must become one to be able to Volund, with their hearts resonating. As such, Jack does what he normally does and puts Hluk in fear, indicating that Jack's heart is filled with fear. However, they could have also resonated when Brunhild left Hluk to be forced to be a Volund, making Hluk feel betrayed just as Jack did in his past. Either of these scenarios would provide a slight look into the human emotions of Jack. The main obstacle for Heracles is finally revealed, the entirety of the city of London. We then get to this panel, a reason as to why I believe that this fight is following a 3-arc structure: an introduction, a confrontation with stakes getting higher towards the end, essentially the rise in action, and then a resolution act where the crisis is put forward, and then a fall in action. We then get to see another different side to Zeus as he stands and cares for Heracles, believing in him heartfully. This is such a huge development for him. Someone who was seen as having interest in only fighting now supports his adopted son, a demigod nonetheless, without faltering. This could be an indication of the gods realizing what they hold dear to them upon facing death after such a long period of no threats. The reason behind Jack killing is told to Heracles, with it simply being shining the lives that they have, hiding the dark emotions that they hold with fear, which is the reason why he classifies that his eyes is a gift from the gods. He releases people from their deep dark emotions due to his dislike of them caused by his betrayal as a child. This labeling of his eyes would seem to hearken to Heracles in a way, as you could argue that the ambrosia is the gifts from the gods, as well as his godhood. This panel shows the fear that humanity has that Jack brings about: fear of losing their money, fear of being tortured, fear of death, fear of not seeing, fear of losing an arm, fear of heights, fear of being buried alive, fear of losing power, all of which he brings about to hide the evil feelings that they may hold, removing the bad feelings that humanity has by ending them after simplifying their emotions. Upon seeing such a monster, humanity is unnerved, whilst the gods state that humanity must be purged. Unlike them, Heracles only has sadness in response to such emotions, declaring that Jack lost, which unnerves Jack in some way. Heracles looks at Jack with love, after understanding the suffering that he went through as a human, which allowed him to lose and pursue self-indulgence. The feelings that Jack has been looking for finally show themselves. Feelings of love. It would seem as if the reason Jack loves the colour of fear is due to its dominance and true nature, for fear never lies. And this would be due to his mother lying to him, a replacement to the love that he thought he was seeing in his mother. But now, true pure love that holds no lies faces Jack. Heracles declares that he ascended to Olympus, which shows that his views of godhood has changed in the 4,000 years that he has been a god. As earlier in the backstory, he states that he will descend to godhood, making friends with gods like Ares and becoming a hero to the young gods, as well as being treated as a son by Zeus. All of this applied resulted in him having this new thought of the gods. As he goes over the faults of humanity, with a panel like the one portrayed by Jack, with more in-depth to the history of humanity. However, unlike Jack, who removes and hides such emotions with fear, Heracles loves humanity, despite all of that, as Heracles aims to do what Jack did to his mother, to save him from his suffering, accepting Jack as a human rather than a monster, a human who was consumed by the darkness. Heracles begins to use his full power as the real fight starts, with the deadliest and most effective labour. Now Heracles faces a lot of damage. His tattoo is nearly fully spread, the blood loss from not only losing his arm but also the knives that hit him from Jack, and finally the labour with the most backlash, as his life is drained with every second. In response, Jack starts his new plan that he thinks of on the spot. The new plan begins, as Jack looks towards where he plans to fire his gun to signal to Heracles, and upon going up, he touches the building to turn it into a volant. When Heracles jumps up to him in response to seeing Jack's eyes, Jack looks down on the fence below him and changes the position of his body, so as to plan the trajectory of his course when he falls to the spike that hits him. Despite this being his plan, he does show fear. This could be fear of the pain that he would suffer, or death that could come from such a plan, or maybe an act to catch Heracles off guard once more. Upon taking the piece of the iron fence out, Jack hides it for later use, grasping his blood to volant it, later on applying it to his face as a form of defense, taking out his jacket to make it volant and cutting the building down, making such a huge divine building fall upon Heracles. Upon confirming that Heracles' emotions were true love, Jack loses composure as he plans to dye him in fear, as possible envy or resentment. Hate, due to him never getting to see such love in his life, and Heracles responds as a warrior, welcoming the challenge. Heracles punches Jack once more, this time in his wound, which did great damage, despite the possibility of the blood reducing some of that force as it is volanted. Jack finally uses the broken piece of fence, which Heracles dodges and connects to Jack's cheeks, punching once more. However, once again, it is where his blood is located. As such, the force was reduced. Not only that, but the time pressure and amount of life force the fight had taken continuously reduces the strength of Heracles, which results in the punch not killing Jack, merely knocking him out. Despite being unconscious, Jack gets up once more, closing in on Heracles, singing London Bridge, which gets nothing but respect from Heracles, showing the same strength that Heracles shows, struggling to the end no matter what, refusing to give up. We see what Jack imagines as he steps forward, a normal life, with a chef who kicked him giving him a feast, and his mother and father together in love, with the hat he stole from his father given to him as he awakes from this dream and faces the only man to ever love him. Jack falls, as Heracles understands the suffering that he has gone through all this time, acknowledging and putting him to rest. However, Jack stands, with the perfect angle in sight, with a false victory in front of Heracles which fails to connect, as Jack pierces Heracles with his hands, covered in his divine blood. Jack recognizes that his ideology lost in the end, as Heracles shows love still even in the face of death, telling him that no matter what he faces, his emotions will never change. Even if it is death, he will always stay true to his emotions, something that Jack has been looking for so long, as he tells him that he will always love humanity, hugging Jack as his final act, for he had no more power to punch. This was his loss. Jack smiles in the end of such love in front of him, now lost, alone once more after taking away the life that truly loved him. Heracles passes the torch to Brunhild, apologizing for jumping into conclusions in regards to Jack, as he recognizes his resolve. As he turns to nothing, Jack left confused and what he feels in this moment, filled with sadness. The gods lose it, for they have lost their hero. Never facing such a loss, they could only throw hate towards Jack, as humanity looks in silence, not knowing how to respond. Zeus releases anger upon this loss, and Gea cries in despair, showing anger towards Brunhild, who forces herself to move forward, leaving to a room where a tribute for humanity is placed, putting Heracles there and finally letting out the sadness that she has been holding on, crying in a room where no one can see her weakness, as she states that she will join Heracles when this is all over. Presumably either she thinks that she will lose the fight she will partake in, or she plans to kill herself upon completion of saving humanity. Such an intense fight, very close to being my favourite fight of the series. The drama and the death flags shown throughout the fight really kept me on the edge of my seat. I will say that rereading it has made me like this fight much more. My first read was a monthly one. As such, the suspense and the fact that this is the most panels in a fight in Shuumatsu affected my viewpoint on the fight, making it my third favourite fight. However, upon rereading, my like for it increased and I enjoyed it much more than the Adam fight, becoming my second favourite fight, and sometimes my favourite. This is all due to the conversation that this fight brings about as they clash in ideologies. I will come back to Shuumatsu whenever a fight is over to analyse it. However, starting from now, I will be moving to analyse my favourite mangas. With this, I have a clear standing point on how to approach the videos. I will continue to improve in this direction that I am taking, as I tackle series such as Hunter x Hunter, Noragami, Magi, Attack on Titan, Berserk, and many more. The structure of the work will be focused on analysing every arc from a particular series. As such, please be patient with me whilst I spend time rereading the first arc of Hunter x Hunter, to then start the scripting process. I really look forward to doing this, and I appreciate the people who have supported me throughout the past few months. Can't wait to see what's in store for this channel. The main goal for the channel is for me to dissect manga works and appreciate them much more. Can't wait to see how my opinions will change for certain arcs in the future. If you liked the video, please leave a like. Dislike if you disliked it. Comment if you believe I missed on anything, or if you have any advice on how to improve. Thank you so much for the support the channel has gotten. I really do appreciate it. See you guys next time.